Hey folks, your OS Reviews. You're watching our retro review of the Nokia Lumia 2520. This is a 10.1-inch Windows RT tablet released in December of 2013. It's unique because it marks Nokia's entrance into the tablet arena. In fact, it's their first ever tablet, and they're only to run on a Windows operating system. So from a design perspective, the 2520 is also unique because it almost resembles a Nokia Lumia phone as far as hardware and design cues are concerned, which is a good thing in our book because Nokia's phones have always been sleek, stylish, but also elegant and not overly stylized. It came in a few different color options. This is a black version, but it also came in a very popping red, and you can get it with contract on Verizon or AT&T, so it came with 4G LTE services bundled. It sold for around $400, also included, of course, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity options underneath the hood, as well as a better camera sensor than you'll find on most tablets. It's powered by a decent autofocus-enabled camera on the very back as well as on the front. In terms of specifications, we have a 1080p screen as well, which is a 1920 by 1080, and it weighs roughly 1.4 pounds, so slightly lighter than the Surface RT as well as the Surface 2, and that was its main competitor. Obviously, RT is a light version of Windows, and we would much rather prefer a full Windows 8 or Windows 10 operating system because RT is unable to support any of the legacy Windows apps, making it, essentially a mobile version of Windows, although you can have full versions of Office in terms of editing Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents. It becomes a lot less useful in terms of, again, productivity. However, there were a good selection of games, although, of course, not as much as the Android or iOS stores at the time, which eventually led to RT's downfall as an OS, and it was actually one of the last tablets you could pick up from Microsoft stores. In terms of other features on here, we can take a closer look next. It had an optional keyboard dock that you can pick up, but that was actually not included in every single version of the tablet. It connected magnetically on the very back, as you can see there. It's a very slim tablet overall, but even though it has that 1.4 pound weight to it, it's not the lightest in the world, so it does feel very solid. So significantly lighter than a comparable Surface or Surface 2, and otherwise it uses a polycarbonate shell just like their phones, which is a soft touch rubber as well as a hard shell rubber depending on the color and the variant that you choose. I like this soft touch rubber on this black version here just because it resists fingerprints a little bit better and makes it nicer to grip and hold. This tablet also has NFC support for tap to pair, which is quite useful if you want to share information between, let's say, a Nokia phone. There is that Zeiss 8 megapixel autofocus camera, and otherwise it omits a full-size USB port just because of how slim it is, which personally I'm not a huge fan of. You have to plug in the dock just to add, a full-size USB port. You can use a micro USB and support OTG, but it's still not as convenient. Anyways, the sides features a micro SD card slot for expanding the built-in memories, which is capped at 32 or 64 gigabytes depending on the version. There's also 2 gigs of built-in DDR3 RAM. There's also a micro HDMI port for connecting to an external monitor or an HD television. So otherwise, it's also powered by a Snapdragon 800 processor, which is a slightly eyebrow-raising choice by Nokia. For a Windows tablet, we typically expect an Intel processor or even maybe a Tegra processor, but again, this is a Snapdragon version, so it's really meant for smartphones. But nonetheless, it's a quad-core chipset at the time found on other flagship phones, and it still ran the operating system fairly fluently because Windows 8 is pretty good as far as the overall UI fluency, and the grid icons as well as the applications load up fairly respectively. We'll show you that later on in this video. But the top also features access to a microphone, and the sides features is the volume rocker as well as a power switch, which seems to be plucked right from other Nokia phones. In fact, the design, the chrome, as well as the feeling is exactly the same, which we actually do like. There's also access to the SIM card slot for, again, data connectivity if you had the AT&T variant, and there's also a proprietary charging port, which is a huge con for us. But again, just like the Surface, you had to use your own charger. Nokia actually recalled their charger that they originally shipped with this unit, and they replaced it with a more generic charger due to dangers of overcharging and overheating. However, this one did have this kind of interesting quick charge feature built in by Nokia, so if you use this charger, you could charge up the battery to about, let's say, 20% in 10 minutes, which was pretty effective as well as impressive. There's also access to a 3.5mm headphone jack, and that's basically it. So a very clean overall presentation, not anything too flashy, and not anything that really sets it apart, I suppose, from other tablets as a whole, but its boxy corners as well as polycarbonate feeling and solid overall build does, make us proud as well as kind of shout Nokia. Otherwise, the front also features a capacitive Windows key as well as a front-facing camera for Skype calls and for conference calls. So next we're going to power this on and show you guys how. The startup process itself is rather swift just because it is running on this Windows RT. And again, when this thing first came out, it was meant to compete with the Surface 2. So in terms of specifications, again, you have that Snapdragon 800 chipset, which is rather unique since it's using that mobile side of processing as opposed to something by Intel, for instance. So here it's loading up, and we have it set up so you can tell that it's in the guest mode. It's quite similar to what you might find on a Windows 8 or 8.1 computer, but then again, it's a light version, so you can't run any of the legacy apps. With that being said, you still have this simplified tile interface, which allows you to easily navigate and find commonly used apps such as Internet Explorer, which, by the way, is one of the only browsers that you'll find on here unless you use the mobile app store to download a third-party version. But there isn't Google Chrome and there isn't Firefox available for Windows RT, at least not at this moment. The main thing that sets the Nokia tablet apart from things like the Surface and Surface 2 is its terrific display. It has a 1080p HD resolution, and Nokia really shows their expertise in making really great contrast in terms of the screen. The black and the colors are quite vibrant and popping, and the viewing angles here are also superior to the original Surface, which is something that you'll find and really comes across in viewing videos as well as other media content such as browsing the web. So it's also very bright enough to be seen even outdoors, and again, it's one of the better displays we've come across on a tablet that is more geared towards mobile usage as opposed to replacing your computer. Otherwise, you have access to a few applications installed by Microsoft, such as the typical Internet Explorer, and since this is running on RT, unfortunately there isn't the option to switch this out for something like Chrome or Firefox, since it can't run any legacy apps. So despite looking like a pseudo desktop, it's really just a light version of Windows like Windows Mobile was, but it looks a bit fancier. There's also things like Skype here for video conferencing. We'll take a closer look at the camera next. Sometimes the screen is a little jumpy, but the battery life on here is decent actually. Once it is fully charged, it can get you around 8 hours or so, so definitely comparable to something like the Surface. And Nokia-specific apps and AT&T-specific apps include things like AT&T Family Map, there's Nokia's Here Maps, as well as Nokia Storyteller, and a Nokia version of the camera application. I think that Nokia did a pretty good job with all of these apps just because the camera app that they designed is a bit more complex than the standard camera app, gives you a few more settings for changing the focus, the aperture, and things that are a bit more advanced. And the Here Maps is also great because it allows for offline navigation using the GPS antenna on here, though of course using this as a GPS is a little far-fetched just because of its size. Otherwise, there's also things such as Nokia Music, and I can slide down here to access a full list of all of my applications, just like with any other Microsoft Windows tablet. And I can also search this up, and you can get a better idea of some of the things that comes preloaded with it. Of course, like any other Windows RT tablet, you have access to a full suite of Office documents, such as for Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Outlook, and also Word editing directly in the box. It's part of that added value, and one of the reasons why Microsoft was really pressing consumers to pick an RT tablet up as opposed to something that ran on standard Windows. With that being said, it does work very well as an Office editor, but if you want more advanced applications, it's definitely not going to be present here, even though it's very sleek, it's very lightweight, and I think all in all it's a great competitor to something like the Surface or the Surface 2. The standard version of the camera app, which you're seeing here, is the same as you'll get on the Surface 2, the Surface, and any other Windows 8 and 8.1 tablet. It lacks some of the finer touches found on Nokia's camera app, but at the same time it still works very well and it's quick to capture a shot. It's going to be great for those emergency situations if you want to very quickly capture something in front of you and of course send it to maybe social media. It does a decent job of focusing as well, and once you have something that you like, you can just tap on it to take an image, and there's also a thumbnail below there that you can tap on to check out. You can tap on the sides here to change between video and also photo taking modes, and there is a panoramic shot mode as well. I can slide up from the bottom of the tablet here to bring up a few other options, including changing the orientation of the camera to the front-facing one, a self-timer, exposure, and changing the shot settings. You can see on the very top here there's also an LED light on top of the camera for the front that tells you the camera is being accessed, and that's one of those privacy settings that you can tweak and change as well. The front-facing camera does a pretty decent job, and it's a nice one as well for video chatting applications such as Skype, and it does a decent job again even under low light environments, which is nice to see. There is a pseudo desktop view on Windows RT, just like on Windows 8 and 8.1, but you can't really access too many programs, and you're limited to things like a recycle bin, a file manager, and also a few shortcuts to apps such as Office and also Outlook for email. So again, these are mostly Microsoft services, so if you're tied to a Google or Apple ecosystem, it's going to be a bit difficult to adjust to this, just because unlike a full-blown computer, you're also lacking, again, some of those legacy apps. Otherwise, you have access to things down below here for a virtual keyboard that you can tap on to bring up. It's a pretty spacious and standard keyboard for Microsoft tablets these days. And something I need to point out about the desktop version of this view that you see here is, unlike the mobile version, which you tap on to go back and into that tile system, is that if you enter a text box into the browser, which is again using Internet Explorer here, it's not going to automatically bring up the keyboard. So sometimes if you tap on, again, a text box here, you have to really bring that up yourself by tapping on the keyboard down below. So it's not automatic like in that mobile view. There's also things down below here for battery status, along with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4G, as well as time and date settings. So pretty standard. If you've used any Windows computer in the past, you'll be right at home here. Otherwise, again, Internet Explorer is not the best browser in the world. It is fairly responsive, and it does a decent job of displaying full sites, but it takes quite a bit longer to load pages in certain, like the New York Times. It's going to take longer than Google Chrome to completely load, which isn't an option here. With that being said, for a mobile processor by Qualcomm, it does a decent job of bringing you a pseudo, again, desktop or computer-like experience. So that's the Nokia 2520, the first tablet from Nokia that kind of got lost in the shuffle when it was first released. It had a very attractive design, and although the screen was beautiful, it ultimately was crippled by the Windows RT operating system, which I don't think is as useful as something like a full version of Windows 8, 8.1, or even Android. With that being said, Nokia's expertise for making great hardware in terms of that beautiful display and that great build quality here still shines, and ultimately this remains a pretty powerful tablet if you're looking for a Windows RT option, even though, again, competing against the Surface, it does have a few shortcomings, such as a lack of a full-sized USB port and a lack of a kickstand, although it trades those in for a much sleeker and thinner experience. You can check out more details about this in our article, but for now, this has been our retro look back review here at OS Reviews. This has been the Nokia Lumia 2520.